doing it live.
We're actually live. Welcome to paraglidingtalk.com. I'm your host, Robert Michaels. Glad you're here. We have a great show lined up. Harley Milne is with us. If you don't know Harley, he flew across the 50 continental states. He went and flew paramotor in every single state in the United States, except for Hawaii, right? Did you do Hawaii too? No,
Hawaii.
he did
Hawaii
Hawaii
was
too.
state
So
number one.
50 states. And yeah, so absolutely amazing story. Then also, he flew and set a record by flying coast to coast from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic coast. That was super cool. Anthony Paragliding actually helped him a little bit just to kick him off the sand and send him on his way. And then now he's got a new adventure, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm super stoked about that. You don't want to miss a single second. Welcome to paraglidingtalk.com. I want to mention just a couple sponsors real quick. I want to mention one of our main sponsors, PPG Smoke. Ryan Roberts is the creator of PPG Smoke stuff. Go check out the website if you want to add some stuff to your flying entourage, your flying stuff. Go check out the website at ppgsmoke.com. Also, the show is brought to you by Paramotor Props. Paramotorprops.com is the website. If you accidentally break a prop, you can order one really quick on their website. It's very, very simple. And if you're interested to know what the pricing is for those, you can go on their website, paramotorprops.com. Also, the show is brought to you by American Allied Drains and Plumbing. If you're in the San Diego area and you're in need of plumbing, you can reach out to the guys there. They are your plumbing company. Mention Paragliding Talk. You'll get 10% discount on the services, and you can reach them by calling 844-777-9055. So stoked that you're here with us. Want to just mention thanks to the moderation staff, Anthony Paragliding, Sean Nafsker, and Ripman is with us tonight. They're going to be taking care of your questions. So if you have questions in the chat and you want to shoot those to me, you can do that by just putting it in the chat. These guys will put it into the private chat, and then I will scan through. See, these guys they're kind of the filter, take care of some of the stuff that I can't. My brain can barely handle this. You know, I'm doing too much right now. Oh, brain overload. I'm just trying to duplicate the page and drag it over, and I can barely handle it. So this puppet show is brought to you by the Patreon supporters, by the way. And so all those Patreon supporters, thank you for supporting the show. If you want to support the show on Patreon, you can do that by going to the link in the description. And for the price of a cup of coffee, you can support the show, and you can maybe learn something that'll help you to be a safer pilot. And we do this every Thursday night. So by the way, there will be no show next Thursday, just to give you a heads up, so you can go fly. That's what you got to do. Okay. I would be flying right now. Someone, I think it was Craig Couch, asked me before the show. He's like, "Do you ever get all logged in and wish that you were flying?" And I was like, "Every Thursday." Every Thursday. Yeah. So 50X challenge. Well, this is going to be closer to your coast to coast for sure. So I'm going to just tell everybody what's going to go on here. Harley is going to fly potentially, as long as everything falls into place, from the Pacific coast where he lives here in sunny Southern California. And he's going to fly all the way to Wisconsin and show up to Oshkosh on his paramotor.
Unsupported, right?
Unsupported. That's right. So Pacific coast to Oshkosh, unassisted. And so I want to first just say I love what you do and what you bring to the table in the flying community. You always have a good attitude. You're willing to share whatever information you have. You connected the dots for a bunch of people to find some of the best people, and relationships have just developed out of that. And so really think, I mean, you're literally one of the candidates of the Freedom of Flight Leadership Award that we put out each year. And I think it's great what you do, and thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me again. I don't feel like it was that long ago that we announced the trip, and I think I was on your show for that. But it's good to be back now, knowing that it's about a week away.
Yep. And we would have done it a week from now, but just not scheduling, just conflicts and different things that are happening. So I want to first talk about, I know one of the things that I really like about your style is your focus on logistics. You really make your challenges are not just some kind of haphazard challenge that you're just going to throw it out and go on an adventure, but your adventures are very well planned and organized so that everybody can pay attention, people can watch, people can follow you. I want to just talk about what logistical challenges are you seeing with this trip compared to your coast to coast and the 50X challenge?
Yeah, I think there are probably two main logistical problems. One, of course, is that if I break a piece of equipment or something malfunctions, I don't have any direct support to bring me that equipment to help get me going again. So it really is going to be a shout out to the community to try and get what I need if something goes wrong. So, if I chop some lines, one of the logistical things I've had to do is I've got to take a very small repair kit with me this time. I didn't have to do that on the coast to coast. And so that's just a small piece of weight, but it adds up. Another logistical thing, of course, is that I need to take my two-stroke oil with me. And I'm still having some heartburn over that because I'm going to be launching out of Sonoma in Northern California with 4 liters of oil, which that by itself, I don't know, weighs a little over 10 or 12 pounds. And so that's really adding a substantial amount of weight that I can't take in other things. And I need 6 liters to complete the whole trip is my estimate based on the calculations that I've done. So that's something where at some point along the road, I'm going to have to find my way to a hardware store and pick up some oil so that I can keep going. So from an equipment and a fuel perspective, those are the 2 biggest challenges. And that's what you would expect to try and solve through a supported approach. The trip itself, I think the big challenges are crossing over 2 10,000-foot mountains, so that's a big challenge. I'm doing it on an 18-meter wing, which from all the testing, 10,000 is about the limit. So I should be foot dragging the top of the mountains as I get over them. And then, of course, it's the middle of summer, so the afternoons and high winds are potentially very risky with some very big thermals. So basically 2 big buckets. One is equipment and fuel, and then the other, of course, is the weather and the actual, getting across these areas.
You've got some airspace stuff that you've got to deal with. Talk a little bit about your research on that.
Yeah, so I put out a planning video that talks about how I plan these trips, but there's a pretty narrow area getting through Salt Lake where you've got restricted airspace pretty much either side of I-80, and you've got to get through there, and sooner get through this restricted airspace, and then you're right there in Salt Lake City where there's Charlie airspace, totally controlled, and it's a pretty big area, and then you've got an Air Force base, which is Delta airspace, and another airport behind that that's also Delta. So very, very tricky airspace to get through. And so you obviously are looking at charts and so forth, but one of the things I also did as part of the planning, particularly for that location and getting over the mountain, there was I called up Chris Senacroce and said, "Hey, dude, you live in this area. How do I get through it?" And so, yeah, the airspace is tricky, but we have a plan, and if things don't go to plan, I have the ability to go land at any of the Class D airports, and I can talk to air traffic control and have ADSB to make sure that everybody can see me. So trying to do everything that makes it safe and legal and not too difficult to get transition through.
Harley, I got a question for you. Why such a small glider?
It's a great question. I think you and I would both know that a 20 meter for this trip would be the right glider to do for my weight and so forth. We know that the 22 Hadron was just a little on the big side for a similar weight range. The main reason I'm sticking with the 18 is because I'm expecting to predominantly have to launch in high winds in the afternoons. And so it's going to make that just a little bit more controllable. A lot of the training that I've done so far, I'm launching in winds that run 8 to 20 miles an hour, and anything over 12 starts to become particularly difficult to manage. And so one of the things that I've been practicing is to make sure that I can do that and not, land up breaking a prop or landing up on my face. Greg Anthony Harris made a really good point, which is, well, why aren't you doing a Cobra? And I went, I should be practicing those too, because a Cobra launch would probably help to get better wing control. But the main reason for the 18 is predominantly because I think I'm going to have high winds in the afternoons.
I guess I was thinking more of the early morning no wind launches with all that weight. And, you're not going to sacrifice much speed on a bigger glider. And I was even thinking maybe like a 24 so that, those early morning takeoffs, would be real easy for you.
Yeah. And fuel economy,
and fuel economy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I normally I would absolutely agree with you. And I could be wrong. I know that a 20 meter is probably the right wing for this job, because on the coast to coast, I flew the first 1,000 miles on the 22 Hadron, and then I did the second 1,000 miles on the Snake 1.2. And at the high altitudes, definitely the 2022 is better, but in high wind launches, the reality is I just can't seem to control the 22.
That's funny, because just a couple extra meters and you're having a lot of issues. I mean, once it's through the power zone, it gets up to the zenith. The glider is just, I don't care if you're on a 30 meter glider, it's going to just sit there and, wait for you. It's just getting it through the power zone where it's going to be tough for you. But
kind of depends too on your profile. If it's high aspect ratio, you're gonna deal. It's like when I go to kite a 2-line glider, it's crazy.
Well, first of all, he's not on a 2-line glider.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and I know, and I'm just trying to say for him, I think, if he was to practice with the bigger glider, I think in the long run, it would help with launching in no wind early morning. It would also help him on efficiency, what he's doing.
Gosh, yeah, you bring up a great point, Rip. I mean, I've done it a couple times where I've overloaded, and I've got props laying all over my garage now.
But then again, you got to think
Stupid small wing.
You'd be covering more ground, though.
Yeah, no, I know.
You would be able to penetrate and cover ground, which is exactly. I can see where Harley's coming from on that. Yeah, I fly a
he knows better than us because
he's done it.
He knows better than us because he's done it. But I'm just putting my 2 cents in as far as those early morning no wind takeoffs.
No, Ripman, I 100% agree with you. And that this has been a very difficult decision because the 18 meter is too small. I'm maxed out on the weight range, but I'm flying a good glider that I've spent a lot of time on now, and I trust it. So
that's
I'm flying
important.
the Da Vinci 18 meter. And the one thing about this 18 meter is it really does behave a lot more like a 20 at the low altitudes, sort of climbing all the way up to the 5,000-6,000 feet. It actually does very, very well. The challenge I've been running into is when I get sort of that 7,000 or 8,000 feet, then the climb rate really does go to hell. So I'm making a calculated, choice here just based on what I think I can do. But I think the 20 would be the better glider. But if I pull this off on an 18, I think if it shows I can do it, then anybody can do this trip on a bigger glider.
That's for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the big takeaways from the 50X challenge and your C2C.
Sorry, just say that again.
Yeah, your big takeaways. What did you take away from those two big trips that you're applying to this escapade?
From coast to coast, he meant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
50X challenge and coast to coast. I'm sure you gleaned some information and said, you know what, this was key, this is bad, this was good. What were your takeaways?
so I think my takeaway from the 50 state tour was that you can plan down to every last detail if you want to try, but that takes, you can't plan for everything, and actually that takes out a lot of the fun and the opportunity to meet great people and solve some problems along the way. So the 50 state tour is really much more of go and see and enjoy the trip, whereas the coast to coast clearly was a very important race for me. And so, the 50 state tour, I didn't know what I was doing, but it wasn't a lot I could screw up. With the coast to coast, I didn't know what I was doing, but there was a lot I could screw up along the way. And clearly I had a few of those. I think my takeaway from those two is that you need to plan, you need to try and make sure you've got the right resources and know what you're trying to do, but just understand that it's going to change every minute, every hour of every day while you're doing it. And so long as you have a plan of how to handle those changes, that's what's important, whether it's running low on fuel and having to go to an alternate airport or having to ditch, or you change your route. Don't screw up and fly through military airspace or something like that.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Will Fly donated $5 to the super chat. Said Resurgence PPG rocks. Thanks, Will Fly. Appreciate that contribution. And Resurgence PPG does rock. So would you say that your biggest takeaway that is what you just shared?
I mean, in terms of handling the problems and logistically getting through it, I think yes. I mean, probably
it's totally different now. Unassisted, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, I'm definitely, this is the forefront of my mind. I think the weather is still going to be the biggest unknown.
Oh yeah.
I had to deal with extreme cold during the coast to coast, and a few places during the 50 state tour. Here I've got the opposite problem. It's going to be too hot. And another reason I went with that 18-meter wing was on the when I want to come down on a descent, a big glider is going to be a little bit more difficult to get some control at the final if I'm getting tossed around by big thermals. So that was another reason I wanted something a bit smaller just to deal with.
Yeah, you made the point, the icing on the cake is that this is the glider that you're comfortable with. That's the most important thing right there, hands down. I remember when I switched from my wing, which was a high B glider. I was flying the 777 Brook, and then I switched to the Alpina 2, and there was a learning curve there. I went from a high B to a C, but kiting, it was a lightweight fabric compared to what my other one was. There was a lot of dynamics that changed, and I remember thinking the first couple XC trials that I did, I was a little nervous because I'm like, I don't know this wing that well, and I don't have a whole lot of hours under it. But I think that's the best decision. Take the wing that you're most comfortable under. I mean, if you're going to enjoy this adventure, that's a really key part, to just be comfortable underneath your wing. And that goes across the board. You're watching this show and you're considering your adventures. This is for fun, man.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this though, sometimes we make these choices because this logistically, makes more sense. Or in this case, I'm treating it like a race, just like with the coast to coast, right? I have a very aggressive deadline in terms of getting across the country. So as much as I will make it fun, it's less about the fun for me right now, rather than achieving it and pulling it off. I think if I was trying to have more fun, I would have given Ripman a call and said, dude, what other gliders have you got for me?
Yeah. You may do it afterwards.
Honestly, Harley, I'd put you on I have a 24 drift air. I'd put you on that. I think it'd be a much better wing to do this trip on. But, like I said, if you're feeling comfortable on an 18, I just feel you're going to lose a lot of efficiency on that 18 overweighted. You're going to be high on the RPMs. You're going to be sucking a lot of fuel. You're not going to be efficient. You want to be efficient when you're doing this trip. You want that glider to be as efficient as possible. Everything
Part of
else,
it
I don't
is
think
speed
matters.
too. I mean, if you're trying to get to a destination, I think that's a huge part of it.
Well, I mean, so when I was using the Hadron 322, right, I was making some pretty good speed. When you're doing 90 miles an hour over Texas.
90?
Yeah, 89 point something, right? You've got some speed there. I mean, Ripman's absolutely right that some of these gliders are going to be faster, but typically most of the gliders that you've described, they would be sort of in the 30 to 55 mile range, and most of them top out sort of that 35, 36 without any wind behind them. And so I'm already doing my average speed on this glider fully loaded at low altitude is about 36 miles an hour. And during my tests here in Northern California, where I might get a 10 or 15 mile an hour tailwind, I've maxed 55 miles an hour across the ground. So this glider's got some speed. Like, that's in terms of efficiency for direct speed across the ground. I don't really have a problem there. My real problem with this glider being so small has to do with efficiency of climb. So if I want big climb rates to try and get some big wind, this glider is not going to be able to achieve that. So with the coast to coast, I was averaging altitudes of between 8,000 and 12,000 feet. With this trip, apart from going over the mountains, I'm probably going to be little more than 6,000 to 7,000 MSL. So basically 3,000 to 5,000, maybe 6,000 feet off the ground for this trip. So once again, I'm expecting some more winds. What I've been finding here in my latest tests, and I won't know until I get the weather, the latest forecast, is typically when you go higher, you're going to get more wind across the ground. But in this case, I may be better off a little bit lower, because as the air cools off at those higher altitudes, what I've been seeing on the weather forecast is that the wind speeds have actually been dropping off. And so for that reason, I'm probably going to fly a little bit lower. So I'm not particularly worried, if I'm taking off, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and I've got a 3-hour flight ahead of me and it's blowing 12, 15 miles an hour on the ground, it's going to be nearly 30 in the air. I'm going to be doing 60 miles an hour for 3 hours. I'll cover 180 miles. I'm good with that. Anything over 100 miles is a good flight for me. I'm still, even with this glider being smaller, I'm still getting 3 hours on a tank. And I've only got a 4-gallon tank now instead of a 4.3 gallon tank from before.
So are you flying from airport to airport?
Yeah, airport to airport.
And are you calling ahead of time? Like, as of like right now, you've already called and said, hey, I'm a paramotor pilot. I'm going to be flying this adventure. I want to know if I can land there. And if you're obviously going to be on airband radio and communicating with towers and things like that, how much pre-prep calls are you making?
So 90% of the airports that I'm going to are all uncontrolled.
Okay.
So there's no calling, talking to airports and so forth. They're all Class G or Class E airports. Most of them are municipal or regional airports. And in fact, I think there's only now one in particular that I may go to. Originally, I had 2, maybe 3 Class D airports, which all you have to do is establish radio communication with the tower, and they'll give you vectors and tell you what the entrance is. So I think one of the things I might just say is that a lot of people might call ahead and say, I'm a paramotor pilot, and the guy sitting in the tower doesn't know what you're talking about. They don't know what a paramotor is. If you're going to class your paramotor, you want to call it an ultralight. They know what ultralights are. They're slow moving aircraft. The other thing
great.
too is if you understand the rules, you shouldn't be asking for permission. You should be asking what the procedures are to get into a particular airport. And that's critical. A lot of paramotor pilots land up with this, they're asking for permission because they don't know. And what I've advised a lot of people who want to go fly at airports is, one of the easiest things you can do is go and talk to the other pilots that are there and ask questions and go to their safety meetings and learn about the politics and everything else. And then once you're forearmed, you can go and approach an airport manager and say, hey, I'm intending to fly an ultralight here. What are the operational procedures and protocols for flying in and out of this airport? And that's the difference. We have the right to fly at these public airports. So it's up to us as pilots. Stop calling it, just because we're unlicensed doesn't mean we're not pilots. We are pilots. And our job as a pilot is to understand the rules and the regulations and the weather and what the capability is of our aircraft. And if we know those things, we can fly safely.
Like that. Yeah, that's really key information right there. Let's do the giveaway 3 minutes early so we can catch
a couple of these too if you want to give these away. Oh,
patches, nice.
These are like 5 by 3 inches, so they're pretty big.
That's awesome. That's what we'll give away tonight.
Heck yeah. All right.
Yep.
So
Let's
no more
spin the
names
wheel.
in the wheel.
No more names of the wheel. By the way,
That's
the
right.
spin of this wheel is brought to you by Nebraska PPG. Josh Bowden runs a school in Nebraska, and if you're interested in getting some top-notch training, you can sign up with Josh and his team today. There's a link in the description. Also, the spin of this wheel is brought to you by Calamity Kite Clinic. Sean actually runs Calamity Kite Clinic and has a great reputation for kiting, and will help you to learn to be better handling your wing. So if you want to sign up with them, you can go to calamitykiteclinic.com. All right, I see my name in there. I'm pretty excited about that.
Oh yeah, everybody's name's in there.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Everybody
Also,
that was in the chat.
by the way, if you guys notice in the chat, Max Marion is with us. He's in there watching the chat. He runs maxacro.com. He's one of the sponsors of the show. So go check out his website and maxacro.com. Sign up for an SIV and get some training with him. You can be a safer pilot. He's got some great things lined up for the next few months. Go check that out. maxacro.com. That's maxacro.com. Oh, it looks like it's going to be close to maybe Rick Wetzel.
It's
pretty greasy.
Yeah,
Did he grease the wheel?
Yeah, he greased it, man.
I did.
It's still going.
Ooh. Congratulations,
Rick
Rick
Wetzel.
Wetzel.
Where's he from, guys?
Good question. I've sent him a bunch of stuff. He wins all the time. This guy's a winner. Chicken dinner.
Don't you know Rick Wetzel? He's from the sky. He
always
lands
says
all the
where he's
time.
from.
Yeah, so Rick, if you can reach out to me through the website paraglidingtalk.com and go to the /contact and send me your information again so I can get this information over to Harley Milne. Harley will send you out one of those patches. Can you hold one of those patches up one more time?
Yeah.
All right, those are super cool. I didn't want to talk because I wanted it to go onto his screen.
Yeah, you got to take it. You got to
Congrats, Rick.
gallery view.
Yeah. All right, super cool. So I want to rip off a few more questions here. One of these is from the chat, Mike P. He said, has Harley already explained his ADS-B out setup? And no, he has not.
I explained it right. So I've been working with avionics, Avionics, who specialize in producing ADS-B for both aircraft and for drones. They have a product that's readily available anywhere in Europe and Australia that's compliant with their standards there, and it's relatively cheap. And the big thing about these units is they're very, very small. The one that's on my paramotor weighs just 26 grams and got a small antenna to it. And my one, of course, is rated for the United States. And unfortunately, there's a few more hoops to jump through here in the United States. You actually have to have a registered paramotor or ultralight to be able to get what's called an ICAO. It's basically a hex number that you plug into the ADSB, and that is what's transmitted and picks up your registration or your call sign, which is your N number. So the unit I have, we've been testing it pretty extensively. Jeff Gorwin and Mark Ingman initially got some earlier this year, and we're testing them and saw some good results. Ironically, I had been independently talking to UAvionics during the coast to coast, and then subsequently again for my trips this year. And so with them, we now have a product that in their discussions with the FAA, we're now permitted to use them while they figure out how to ultimately legislate it. The big point that we've been conveying is that we don't want to be required to have these things. So we want to continue to go down the path like we have with 103, which is that we're not required to have certain pieces of equipment. They should be available to us to use optionally to add safety measures to what we're doing. And so that's what's been agreed to so far. The current registration process, if everyone started registering their paramotors, they would create a pretty substantial burden to the FAA. So I don't know whether it will happen, but the FAA introduced a very simple registration process for drones when they first started coming out. It's possible they could do something like that for paramotors, which would just basically allow you to provide your name and address and probably your identity, and then that would basically give you an ICAO that you could use for ADSB. What's up, Rip?
You're muted.
Is on mute.
I just saw somebody walk by in the background, so I was waving hello.
Oh, that was my wife.
Hi, Aaron.
Yeah.
We haven't heard the register.
So, how can people follow you on this adventure? ADSB obviously is going to be a different machine, but how can they track you?
Yeah. So my primary tracking device is my Garmin InReach Explorer, right? Which is basically my safety. If something happens and I land somewhere, or I have to communicate something else where none of the other communication vehicles that I have will work, the InReach will use satellite and transmits that. So if you go to 50xchallenge.info, you'll see there's a link there to share.garmin with the link to where it shows my plan track, and then it will actually show you my progress. So that's the primary way that you can do that. A second way is you can go to track24.com. I think that's the correct. I suppose I should look that up, right?
Can people fly with you? Can people follow you along and fly with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me finish the first thought, which is that Live Track 24 is another way that you can track, and that one's pretty user friendly as well. And that will show you my last flights, and then ADSB. So you can go to what is it here? It's globe.adsbexchange.com is another one. You can punch in my N number, and those are all great ways that you can track me live and monitor my progress. There is actually a post on the Facebook 50X Challenge page, and I'm going to reshare that a couple days before I actually launch out as well.
That's awesome. 50X Challenge.
Sorry, I think Anthony had a question, and I missed that.
No, I mean, if people wanted to, if they're tracking you and stuff, but you're going to be making quite a few stops along the way. So and obviously there's quite a few paramotor guys in this chat that live along that route. maybe they can fly with you and, on your takeoff or your landing. What do you suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. I encourage people to do that. I think one of my greatest memories from the coast to coast was, first of all, I had some guy I didn't know from anywhere that showed up at an airport and said, "Are you Harley?" And I said,
That's
"Yes."
awesome.
Nice.
And he did. He took off there with me, and he flew with me as I left the airport. I think meeting me in the air coming in, like Mark and Elena did, was definitely one of the biggest highlights of the coast to coast, where I didn't know they were there. And the next thing, I'm coming into the airport and I see paramotor pilots, and it's so exhilarating. It really is. It's so uplifting that you don't expect to see some people, you see them there, and you take off and land with them. And I would say that if you were to pick a time, that's the best way to sort of connect with me and fly that way. But honestly, you can come and launch with me. I'll just point out that, I'm usually concentrating. Once I'm up in the air, I'm immediately trying to get on my track and I'm trying to go. So I'm not kind of keeping track of anybody, but feel free to, come in close, come in wingtip, and, get the pictures and all that kind of thing. I super encourage it. And a couple people have said that they might do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's super cool. Hot Buttered Steve Productions donated $10 to the super chat. He said, "Robert, I suddenly lost interest in somebody I was pursuing when I found out they actually liked me back. I have no patience for people with bad judgment." Well played. Well played. Thank you for that contribution. We've got a couple other questions that popped up. One of those is, how long, this is from Mad Sloper. He said, "How long is Harley estimating this trip is going to take?" Everybody wants to know.
So I published 7 to 10 days is what I think is achievable. I'd like to make 7 days.
7 days.
Yeah, because it's basically the same distance as the coast to coast.
Yeah, let's think about it. How many miles is it?
It's literally going to be like 2,100 miles with the route that I picked.
Dude, you're insane, man. You are insane, dude. I mean, you have brass, and I'm not going to say the other side of that because I don't want to cuss jaw, but yeah, it's unbelievable, man. Who can do something like that?
Especially so he's matching the same almost the same distance and the same amount of time, but unsupported. He doesn't have somebody, getting him a hot meal and refueling, and there's a lot of comfort that comes with that support, I'm sure, on the road, Harley, as you're gonna miss on this trip, no doubt. So that's a big feat, man. That's impressive.
Yeah, so I did it with a team, right? So my personal objective here is that I try and do the same thing or very close to it, unsupported. 300 miles per day is what I'm hoping to achieve, which basically means a minimum of 3 flights averaging between 30 and 35 miles an hour to make 100 miles per 3-hour flight. So on the coast to coast, I averaged about 7.5 hours per day in the air. And I would do 3 to 4 flights per day. And obviously I was able to fly all day because of the weather. With this trip, I have 15 hours of sunlight, but I'm not going to be able to fly all 15 hours of sunlight because of the weather. So that's a big part, but I'm still going to have to try and fly, roughly 9 hours per day, a minimum of 3 to 4 flights to pull that off. So this is not, I will not be slouching, but it's going to be a tough trip, but that's the challenge.
God bless you, dude.
I just pulled up.
You should get your logo, a Harley logo.
Harley, are you stomping the
I do an hour and a half in the seat. I can't wait to get out of the seat. I can't imagine 3
That's
flights.
what I'm saying.
Stop,
3 crazy
Harley,
flights.
are you stomping the taboo of no midday flying? You're flying all day, every day.
No. I'm definitely, this trip, you can't do that, right? In the winter
Right.
cool months, that might be possible to do, but this trip I'm not going to be able to fly all day. If in a perfect world, I can get 2 full flights in the morning. So if I launch at 5 a.m. when it gets light, and I manage to do 6 hours where I'm on the ground as late as 11 o'clock, and then I do a late afternoon flight and launch at 6 p.m. and land at 9 p.m. and I achieve 300 miles, then I've met my goal. The problem is I could be grounded by as early as 9 a.m. in the morning and lose that second flight. And that's going to be very problematic. So if I lose that second flight, then I've got to hope that I get some big wind to make up where I'm flying closer to 150 miles on the 2 flights that I can do in a day. But I'm expecting to get 3. One of them may just prove to be, even if I could fly till 10 o'clock and I achieve, 50 or 75 miles on that trip, that can all work.
Yeah, that's a long trip. I just pulled up the little distance straight from Sonoma to like the top point. If you just flew perfectly straight, you're still 1,800 miles.
Yeah,
So
and
you've got to make a bunch of zigzags because you've got airspace.
Yeah. I just sent you a link. You can actually pull it up on the website too, where it shows the straight line and then it shows you the planned route. And unfortunately, the planned route has to be longer, particularly going through Wyoming. I wanted to stay south of the reservations.
Robert, bring that map up so I can see when he's talking.
Shoot, I literally just closed it right when you said that. Hold on, I'll pull it up there. I got it.
I just sent you a new link, so hopefully that'll pull it up for you.
Yeah. So also, while you've been doing real quick, while he's pulling that up, you've been doing a lot of practice over high altitude flying over Mount Shasta and all that. What have you gained from that? What have you taken away from that?
That's one of my next questions, actually.
Oh, snap.
Good job, Gringo. We're on the same.
Thanks.
We're thinking
So
the same.
there were 2 primary, maybe 3 primary goals with that. The first goal was to make sure that I had the engine tuned properly, that it was able to achieve 10 and 12,000 feet, and making sure that I was leaned off enough. And I've done 3 different trips to go do that. One of them, because I had a new fuel tank, it turned out I was getting a vacuum from the tank, and I had to drill bigger holes in the cap to try and vent things through a little bit better. So that was one test to make sure the engine was doing everything that it wanted to do. I had also switched the avgas for this trip, and so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't creating any new problems if I was running the machine pretty close to full power for 2 or 3 hours straight. And so part of this high altitude test, I've had literally the throttle is pegged for 2 straight hours at nearly 8,000 RPM, and I don't blow the engine up, and it runs just fine, and it stays at the right temperatures. So that says a lot about these engines. I've done it both with the Vitarazi and with the Corsair, and I got to tell you, my Corsair just continues to amaze and surprise me that you can just drill that engine for at high RPM for a very long period of time without coming off the throttle, and it just keeps doing its job. So that engine was a big part of it. I also wanted to see what the wing would do, and of course, the 18-meter wing really at 10,000, it's tapped out. There's nothing left in that wing to keep going. You really do need an updraft, and if you get any downdraft, you're going down with the downdraft. I've had climb rates as little as 50 feet per minute, and then the next thing you know, you're doing a descent to 400 feet per minute.
Oh,
I'm going to make one more quick question comment. Paramom, Linda Anderson, she says, I'd need food delivered to me, which made me think of a really good thing. Will you be, when you're in the air and you're going to be making these landings, and to
Uber
refuel
Eats.
stuff, you're going to get hungry. Can you Uber Eats? Can you call some sort of food share or a food ride
Lyft.
to deliver you some food? Or would that be considered ground support?
No, so anyone who wants to show up at an airport with a sandwich and something to drink, please do. If there's the biggest support, that's where I need it, because it's where the least planning has gone in as to whether I eat or not.
Fasting for 7 days.
Food and Motul 800 would be ideal, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I know that Motul 800 is going to show up, I can ditch my oil, which I would love to be able to do.
Right.
Oh, that's a good idea.
But
you got to trust them, though.
Yeah, exactly. So, particularly for my night stays, obviously I plan to try and reach a certain airport, and those airports often have facilities like rental cars, or they're close enough to a city. Some of them even have courtesy cars. And so Winnemucca is one of those where I'm only expecting to be at the airport about 6 hours. So I'm probably going to rough it that night, but I'll have to make sure that I either get some food. There's a courtesy car there for me, and I'm going to be able to go into town, get something to eat and drink, and then probably sleep at the airport for a few hours and then do it the second day. I think Salt Lake City, my goal is if I can get there a little bit earlier, then I'm hoping to get a motel for the night and try and get a bit of decent rest, and maybe connect with Chris Santa Croce, and then leave very early in the morning again. For that crossing, both the crossings of the mountains, I want it to be pretty bright so I can see what's going on if something doesn't quite go as planned. After that, things get a little bit more sketchy. I might have to give our Josh Bowden a call and go like, hey, could you run me up some food from somewhere in Nebraska? But the good things with a lot of municipal airports is they're not that far away, and you can catch a taxi or an Uber or something like that. But if you want to show up with food and water, you'll be one of my biggest fans. Well, I'll be one of your biggest fans.
So technically, yeah, you do cross Nebraska right there.
Yeah, if you go back to the map that I gave you, I follow Route 80.
That's as the crow flies.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. Super cool. Oh yeah, you dip down in there pretty deep.
Yeah, we're
Bring
not
the
seeing
other one up, Robert.
Yeah, bring the other one up. We're looking at your other one.
Yeah, I was just being selfish.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so the red line up here on top is crow flies, and then your actual flight path is down right through Nebraska.
Right.
Yeah, so he's got no excuse to not bring you a sandwich.
Nebraska is a pretty big state. It's still a bit of a drive.
That cracks me up.
We'll make sure that he gets that done for you.
The good news is once I hit Highway 90 up there past Sioux City, Ray Pierce, who was my crew chief on the last one, he's going to be on his way to Oshkosh. And so if I know Ray, he'll drive slow enough to, pretend he's not following me. But if I call him,
Ray's in the chat.
Ray's in the chat. Yeah.
We're gonna put.
There you go.
We're gonna put a tracker on Ray.
Yeah. Track Ray, because he'll know what's going on. I know Ray well enough that he's going to be following. He won't get any work done that week. He's going to be unpopular with his wife.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, you can bet on Gringo. You can bet on Josh Bowden. He'll probably get in the air with you.
That would be awesome. I think Trevor Steele out of Utah also mentioned he might do that. So that'd be a huge honor to have him join me. Honestly, it's an honor when anybody.
I can imagine.
Out of their day.
I had a situation that I just love when I show up to the site and somebody is flying there when you think you're going to be by yourself and someone shows up. It's like, yeah, I can fly with someone. It's because I mean it's like a drug addict. If you're flying by yourself, if you're using drugs by yourself, you're a full on addict.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is so cool is like, you think you're in the air all by yourself, and then suddenly somebody is there, and then you land at the same time, right? And you're like, hey, how you doing? It's just that surprise, and then of course all the stories, like that camaraderie that you get right there is everything I think we all love about paramotors.
I bet you really enjoy that, especially after a 3-hour flight of solitude. You're just, all you hear is the wind and the motor maybe, and a lot of thoughts and stuff. But I'm sure that was pleasant.
Yeah,
to see.
it really was. I mean, I remember when Mark and Elena showed up, and we made this decision, like, should we try and do one more quick flight? Like the goal had been to get into Georgia, and we were just, I don't know, 50 or 60 miles short. And it was like, can we do this? What's the nearest airport? And Mark and Elena happened to be following, and I had no idea. It was such a huge surprise, and we could have elected to stay on the ground, and we didn't. So that's why it was so absolutely incredible to have them show up and meet them in the air. It really did make that, and we met the goal. We got to Georgia that day, which was, was the big hump.
Yeah, that's great, man. What type of training goes into flying a flying adventure like this one?
I mean, I think we've talked a lot about the preparation in terms of making sure the equipment works, that you have all of the right equipment, looking at the weather, planning your route, planning your logistics on the ground. Physically, I don't feel as prepared as I think I should be. Kind of felt the same way during the coast to coast, where I try and do some exercise where I'm building up upper chest strength and building some core, definitely building up my legs and as much stamina as possible. When you start flying paramotors, you walk 100, 200 feet out to the field and try and lay the wing out, and you're gasping for breath before you even lay it out, or you blow a launch, right, and you've got to relay it out, and it's exhausting. And so everything that I'm trying to do is I can do that all by myself with 100 pounds on my back, and lay the wing out, deal with it in high wind, and walk a half a mile with all of that gear anyway. So that's a lot of the work that I've done to physically prepare for this trip, and I still don't think I've done enough.
You look like you slimmed down.
Yeah, I wish. Thanks for the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually slightly heavier than I was. I was at 185 for the coast to coast, and lost the 5 pounds that we thought I would lose on that trip. I'm at 190 pounds right now. I would prefer to be at 185 and expect to lose 5 pounds, but I might get lucky. I might lose a bunch of weight on this trip.
If no one brings you sandwiches. Max Acro, he asked this question: what about weather conditions for wing loading? And that's a question he asked a while back. If that helps for context.
Yeah. So I'm on the upper range on this glider. I'm going to be weighing in at about 280 loaded on a glider that's rated up to 308 pounds. So I'm really on the top end, but I think in rough air, that's going to help me. And I've been flying a lot of rough air as part of the training for this trip. We're launching it in high wind. I'm launching at 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon here in Northern California, and I'm getting thrown around like a good rag doll for a good 15, 20 minutes climbing out of the heat. And so I've done a lot of that work to understand what the glider is going to do. And I've done some of it with very little loading, and I've done some of it with very high loading. And, the honesty is I want to be heavily loaded. And then the other thing that I tend to do is I trim out fairly quickly, so that the wing is slightly less responsive. So your climb rate goes to hell, but at least you don't get the glider threatening to collapse on you. And I haven't had this glider collapse on me yet, so that's very promising. I did have a bad landing the other morning, where the wind was just very strange, and about 15 feet off the ground, I landed up with one side dipping. I don't really feel like it was a collapse. It certainly felt like one, but actually what happened was the wing sort of stopped, and then the gust of wind lifted me up, and it was that lifting up that kind of stalled me a little, because I was sort of a little too deep in the brakes. And so I was able to come down, but landed on 2 feet and then went down in one knee. So it's that kind of thing that's a little scary coming in on those thermic days.
And I want to just
the landings are tough too.
I want to put a disclaimer in here. By the way, you should not be flying midday, anywhere near midday, especially if you're a newer pilot. And it doesn't really matter. I've watched. I know Mark Rogers mentioned Dust Devils, and that is there's a reason why they're called Dust Devils. This is what takes out some of the best pilots that you see in Europe. You'll every once in a while you're going to hear, oh, so and so hit the deck and they're in the hospital and they got broken back, or they got jacked up, or they died, and it's almost always a low situation when they're coming into land either at the end of a cross country and it's still kind of midday, or a Dust Devil situation when you're low. Flying midday is I remember when Phil Russman, my instructor, was like, you should not be flying midday, and especially during the summer. Little different situation with free flying. What Harley is doing is planned. This is organized. This is well thought out. So don't think that you could just go out and send it midday after you heard, well, Harley said he's going to do it. This is something you really need to consider before you go playing around in thermic weather.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that I'm pushing boundaries, but they're with very, very careful planning, training, and thought about it. There's very clearly some risk here, but you're still not going to catch me flying in the middle of the day for this trip during the middle of the summer. It's one thing doing it in cool weather during the middle of the winter in the southern part of the country, but I've got over 1,000 hours, and I've got probably a fair amount of cross country flying across a large portion of the country. So hopefully I'm better experienced than some, but also with that experience, I think, as you're pointing out, it's the experienced guys that make the big mistakes too. And so, I do keep that in the back of my mind. When Kiwi didn't make it, that still plays on my mind today, and I think about it on all these trips.
Yeah. I have to mention a couple sponsors. One of those is iFly Indiana Powered Paragliding. If you're interested in flying paramotors, no better place to get proper training than iflyindiana.com. Kevin and his team will get your feet off the ground. Also, this show is brought to you by Lone Star Paramotor. If you're in the Lone Star state of Texas, you can reach out to Ron Turan and his team for world-class training. That's Lone Star Paramotor.com. Also, this show is brought to you by Resurgence PPG. If you're interested in supporting our men and women of uniform, you can make a tax-deductible donation to resurgencepppg.com, and by donating, you're sponsoring those who have put their lives on the line for your freedom. You can reach out to Todd Scandrett at resurgencepppg.com. Follow 50xchallenge.com for this. Is it 50x challenge? .info. Thank you. I always want to throw a .com in there. .info. It doesn't ring quite as well as .com. So 50xchallenge.info. You can follow this trip. He'll have links to follow his ADSB, his Garmin, and if you can support him in any way, please reach out to him through the website. and I'm super stoked about the adventure. We are definitely going to be following it here, and so maybe somewhere along the line we can get you to chime in, or maybe when we're on here live, I'll send you a ping just to see where you're at, and we'll see how things are going. And at the very minimum, when you make it to Oshkosh, I want to see the final fly-in video. Are you going to record this adventure?
I'm probably going to try and do some time lapse. I'll be honest with you, every piece of additional equipment
Yeah.
is just one more thing I can't deal with.
Yeah.
So originally I was going to take 3 cameras along with me. I think I'm going to take 1. I was going to try and do time lapse on one of the GoPros. But at some point those are going to fill up, and I'm along the way, I can't carry enough cards and all the rest of it. So
2,200 miles.
The big goal, I think, will be that before and at the end of each flight, I might do a quick live stream and just talk about what was going on, and so there'll be some kind of history to that, just in case anything happens.
Sure. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to go to the after show. I know that there was other questions that didn't make it. If you want to jump on, I'm going to put the link to join the after show in the description so you can come and hang out with us. Thank you again so much. Moderation team, appreciate you guys and what you guys do and what you bring to the table every week. Thank you for all the supporters of the show on Patreon and PayPal. You guys are awesome. And if I don't see it on the air, I'll see you in the air. So thanks for watching. Have a great night.